everyone. Welcome to this lively discussion. We are going to cover business leadership, wisdom from the front lines. And I'm just going to read the description, but I'd love it if any of you want to share in the chat, and Adriana will let us know if you want us to cover anything that we're not talking about. So each of these amazing leaders are going to kind of talk about their story, their leadership journey, and share nuggets of wisdom with us. But if you want to hear anything that we're not covering, please let us know, because the description of this panel really is about being a leader on the front lines of today's workplace environment, the many obstacles that require unwavering grit, leading successfully, and that it requires perseverance as we navigate through these inevitable pitfalls, uncertainty, and sometimes covert inequity. So we want to talk about leadership in that way, but if there's anything we're not covering, please, please, please share in the chat. We love a lively chat, and we are paying attention, and Adriana is letting us know what you're saying because I can't see it. But we're going to start. I highly recommend, and instead of taking up too much time, because we only have an hour, 56 minutes, I strongly recommend that after this, you go back to their bios and read their bios, because these are four amazing, accomplished women that I'm very lucky to be in the same room with. So having said that, we're going to start with, I think we'll start with you now, Hillary. We did this morning, everyone. So we're going to take what we learned from this morning's panel and we're going to expand upon it in this one. So Hillary, will you talk to us about your journey, your leadership journey, and share your nuggets of wisdom with us?
I will. Thank you, Tuni. I'm going to try to mix it up a little bit from this morning, but it might sound a little familiar to my esteemed colleagues on the panel. My name is Hillary Fagan. I'm the Executive Vice President of Business Development at the Rhode Island Commerce Corporation. And before I launch into sort of my journey, and I actually talk about my journey as a journey of reinvention, I do want to share a statistic I shared this morning about what's happening to women in the workforce right now, which is really a little scary. But NPR reported that women are leaving the workforce at 4 times the rate that men are due to this COVID-19 situation. And they looked at the month of September, and they calculated 865,000 women over 20 dropped out of the American workforce, and compared to 216,000 men in the same age group. And that's from the US Labor Department statistics. And it's really being identified as a childcare crisis in many ways, among other things. So it's not just that, but it is a situation that is daunting, to say the least. And I think this conversation today is super important and super topical. So going on to sort of how I got to where I am today, I started off after college in financial services and worked at large investment banks. One was Merrill Lynch, where I really fell in love with sort of the equity business and got my licenses there, and then was lucky enough to join Morgan Stanley in New York in the institutional equity sales desk, working at on the U.S. equity desk, and did that for several years. And then this is where my reinvention sort of really started to take place. I got married, and my husband was living in Washington, D.C., so moved to Washington, D.C., and needed to figure out what to do after getting married, and landed eventually at the NASDAQ stock market as a director in their corporate client group, working with NASDAQ listed companies, which again was similar, but a little bit of a pivot. And then we moved again for my husband's job back to Providence, Rhode Island. And there weren't a lot of financial services opportunities at the time. And I had children and didn't really want to travel a lot. So pivoted and reinvented, and was lucky enough to be offered a position in admissions and marketing at an all-girls independent school in Providence. And there really worked and revisited with the importance of education, and especially women's education in STEM fields. I did that while my children were young so that I could sort of balance a little bit. And then decided after several years doing that I wanted to sort of reinvent again and go back into business, but not lose education. And therefore repositioned myself and joined the Rhode Island Commerce Corporation, which is the state's economic development arm, as the executive vice president in business development. It was a new department, so it was almost like a startup. I had to build a pipeline plan. How am I going to get companies to expand and also attract them to the state? You know, what are the elements in that? I had to hire up a team of folks who would lead by sector and start tracking results. And so it was a little bit of a startup, but we had incredible support from the entire community, from the governor to the Secretary of Commerce, all the way down. And we were able, through the tools that were implemented and the strategy, we were successful in doing this for the state. And the ultimate mission in all of that was to create jobs for Rhode Islanders. So again, this is a long sort of rambling way to where I am, and it is definitely a story of reinvention due to family circumstances and choices I made. So that is a quick background. A couple of things I wanted to point out that our panel talked about in advance. One, I'm going to talk a little bit about mentorship, and the other would be lessons in leadership that I've learned. To be a leader in whatever you're doing, no matter what it is important to have mentors. And there were two stories, and I'm sorry guys, I'm going to share these again because I really love these stories. Two stories I wanted to share. One is I was at the Women's Summit at Bryant University several years ago, and the lunchtime speaker was a woman I didn't know, Huda Coatby. You all know her at the Today Show. I probably mispronounced her name. But she came up to the stage and started telling the story of her journey. And it was incredibly funny, painful. You know, we laughed, we cried, we clapped, we stood. It was the most engaging story, but it was about her journey. And I won't sum it up at length, but the basis was she left college and decided she was going to go get a job as a broadcaster and felt like she'd get the first job. And a week after this journey in her Toyota Camry, all the way down the east coast of the US, started in the mid-Atlantic, ended at the panhandle of Florida, days of rejection. And she came to the conclusion that she had made a big mistake and was going to go back to her home and rethink her whole career. And she needed directions to get home because she was lost, and found an NBC station in the panhandle and walked in and shared her tape and asked for directions, and this gentleman, Stanley, hired her. And that changed the direction of her life, and he stayed her mentor throughout sort of her journey. So it was that idea of you need someone who believes in you. And I thought that was a really important message for all of us, no matter what we're doing, is to really bond with those mentors. The second story, which you all probably know, is Sally Krawcheck, who I don't know well, but I read, I think it was in Vanity Fair, about when she was let go from a large bank she was leading. And the scenario was her division, her retail division, was the top performing division. She felt very secure in her position. It was going great. There was a board meeting on downsizing. She had no worries. She got a call the next day. She was let go. And she called someone in the boardroom and said, "What happened? You know, I was doing so well." And that gentleman said, "You didn't have anyone in the boardroom who had your back. You didn't have that person vying for you." So again, a pretty extreme example of the importance of mentors and of your networking abilities as people in the workforce. So those are two quick stories, not my stories, but I just love them so much. I wanted to share those. So the importance of mentor, I'd say, is one way to learn and engage with others and have support as you journey through your successful career. The second is a couple of quick lessons, and I'll just share one of them because I don't want to go on too long. But a lot of people say, find your passion. Your passion is what's going to get you to succeed in your journey. I've never known what my passion was, but I have realized that I can embrace a mission. If I believe in something I'm doing, that for me is the substitute of finding your passion, which I still don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. So my words would be leadership lessons. Whatever you're doing, make sure you believe in it. And if it's not what you believe in, find something that is sort of your mission, and then I think success will come. So I think I'll probably wrap it up there, and hopefully we'll have a good discussion. But I want to thank you for your time, and I love this group, so I'm going to let Tuni take it away.
I love that. And I just added, and for those of you attending that we can't see in this webinar format, I am chatting up the chat box. So please, read that, share, and Adriana is texting me. So if you have any questions or you want to add anything, please let us know. I just, on what Hillary just said, building on that, build your networks and be thoughtful about your relationships. You'll probably hear more about that here. And please reach out to me. I put my email and my LinkedIn profile there. So your network is so important. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Kristen. And I loved your story this morning, and I'm looking forward to hearing it again.
Maybe I'll change it up a little bit too, if I can. In listening to all of you, my mind is just racing with all of the things that I'm taking away from what you're saying. And our stories kind of overlap in some ways, but it's all resonating with me so deeply because our experiences are similar and we're taking away similar things. Before I get started, I'm Kristen Abdelaziz. I'm the Assistant Director of Communications at Amica Insurance. I've been with Amica for 18 years. And so my entire career has been there so far. Had you asked me right out of college, I'd never thought that would be the case. I was always told to expect to jump 7, 8 times throughout the course of your career. But I think I've stayed for a number of reasons, but mostly because I've always been challenged. And Amica's got such a great culture. It's a promote from within type arrangement where you have some sacrifices. You have to be mobile for parts of your career and the opportunities that exist. But I've had people that have pushed me to develop along the way, men and women. And it just kept me so engaged. And throughout the time there, I've had 6 different roles, fundamentally different roles that have challenged me. And from each one of those, I've taken away different lessons. So this morning I ran through them. I'm going to try to abbreviate that a little bit because my mind's running some other places. But whenever I first started, I was fresh out of college, new to kind of adult life. And the first role I had was as an individual contributor. I was an insurance adjuster out in the field. And for anybody that knows anything about insurance adjusters, you're not dealing with people on their good days. They have just crashed their car, their house just burned down. They might be angry, they might be distrustful of the process. And so you're kind of coming in on an upslope, trying to earn trust. But one thing I liked about Amica very early on is that I just feel like they do it the right way. You're out there to try to truly help, and you go home at the end of the day feeling like you did something that mattered. You help people put their life back together. And when I looked at my peers around me at that point in my life, several of them were in roles where they didn't feel like they were making any difference. So I think this is echoing what Hillary said, that life is just too short to spend your time doing something where you don't feel like you're having an impact. And so I was incredibly grateful at that point in my life to be in a position where I got to do something every day. It was a tough job. I mean, there's some definite challenges there, but in the end, I did feel like I was making a difference. And so I've tried to keep that through every part of my life. And after a couple of years of doing that, I got to transition out and do some recruiting for Amica. I was looking around the country at colleges and universities, looking for people to join their leadership program. And Amica's not a huge company, so our class sizes were pretty small. And so it was a relatively competitive process. And because this is a women's summit, I thought I'd bring up this topic of the way women and men sometimes present themselves a little bit differently whenever they're interviewing for a position. And if you've read about this topic, I think that it's pretty well documented that there is a confidence gap. So the men often, and again, these are generalizations, I met plenty of confident women, but men more often present themselves very confidently and take possibly the same set of experiences and are better at advocating for themselves about why that prepares them to take things on. And they come across in interviews sometimes as just more ready, where women can sometimes be more reserved, more likely to attribute their success to someone else. And so as I was going through that process, it kind of inspired me to really start to practice advocating for myself and encouraging women around me to do the same. It makes such a difference if you're able to talk about your successes and your challenges and what you've accomplished in a way that feels natural to you. I think it opens you to more opportunity. It allows others to see that you have a real hold on your own self and your personal brand and what you can offer. So that was an important lesson for me from there. I went through positions where I was then supervising others and doing all the hard things that supervisors had to do. So I went from being peers with a group of people to having to document their performance and correct them and sometimes discipline and all those challenging things. And my struggles there were more around likability, because we were friends before that. And now I have to tell you that you didn't do a very good job on this project. So that was a challenge, but I think that through time, I've gotten better and better at balancing being likable, which I think is important. And I think if you're going to be persuasive and have people listen to you, likability can make a difference. So I've gotten better at balancing being likable while getting the job done and offering those hard pieces of feedback that we have to offer. So that was kind of just another layer. From there, moving around the country, I eventually ended up in an executive role where I got to travel around the country and oversee a number of amicus offices and talk to individuals that were working in the field level, kind of some newer employees. And it was when I got to the executive level that I first felt, and I had someone say to me, that seeing a woman in this role made a difference to them. And so that made me kind of step back a little bit and feel a greater responsibility to do more for women and other women and men. I think that you're constantly throughout your career building networks, and you never know when those networks are going to come back to help you. So I'm a true believer in never burning bridges and trying to maintain relationships, regardless of where your path is going to take you, because you don't know where it's going to end up. And as I've listened to all the women speak here today, it's been amazing. You never know when that passion's going to come or when the turn's going to come, when you decide you're going to change course or step away from where you've been for a while. And so having broad and strong networks to lean on at those times, I think makes all the difference. So I am really appreciative of hearing all of these stories. And I think that some of the feedback we got was the audience from the last group wanted us to talk a little bit about how we're leading during these times. And as Hillary mentioned, so many women are dropping out or stepping away from the workplace. And to me, it's heartbreaking. At the same time, I know that it's a very personal decision for people. And so I think empathy at these moments is hugely important, and supporting women, regardless of what their situation is. And I feel very fortunate to work for an employer that has been extremely flexible. So Amica throughout this has offered flexibility for parents that are staying at home. I work at home several days a week now because I have 2 sons that are here homeschooling. They haven't gone back to school yet. And I've been offered the flexibility to do that. I know that's not possible in every company, in every position. But the more empathy and support we can give to each other, people are innovating and finding ways to help each other cover responsibilities. I think not only will you hopefully keep good employees, but you're going to strengthen those networks so that if they're ready to come back in the future, you're where they want to be. They're very challenging times, and I look forward to hearing how everybody else is handling that as well. So with that, Tuni, I'll kick it back over, and thank you.
I love it. I love listening again. I feel like I'm lucky because we get to listen to it twice, and there's more depth the second time. Something I really enjoyed from what you've shared is, you've developed such empathy because of your more traditional trajectory, right?
Yep.
So your leadership journey is more traditional than, mine definitely. and Lois's, and, all of your leadership journeys are so diverse, just like we are as humans and as women, right? So I love that about this discussion. Something you talked about and we touched on in Hillary in the first one was reinvention, pivoting, and being agile in these times, right? And something I posted in the chat is that you shared that statistic that I'm seeing way too much in my news feeds, Hillary, earlier, about the hundreds of thousands of women dropping out of the workforce. So all this, we had so much traction going, and it's like we've taken a major landslide, right? But we, Innovation Studio, District Halls, Venture Cafes, we're seeing, and in our Roxbury Innovation Center, we just had a pitch event. The majority of the pitchers were women. And it's so exciting to see, on the flip side of that, slivers of silver linings and the innovation that's coming out of this. And I feel like, 800,000 plus women in America have stepped off their track, right? But hopefully we can get them on a different track that's a better track. And so with that moment of inspiration, I'm going to pop over to Barry, and we'll wrap it up with Lois, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. And I have some talking points that are continuing to pop up. So take it away, Barry.
Great, thanks, Tuni. And hi, everybody. I'm Barry Harlem. I am co-founder of Trouble, and I'll give you a quick summary of my background, which chapter 1 was in the academic world. I was a tenured marketing professor. Chapter 2 was in the corporate world. I worked at CVS Health, a startup that was in the digital marketing space, BJ's Wholesale Club, where I ran marketing and membership, and then most recently was chief marketing officer at Hudson's Bay Company that owns Saks Fifth Avenue off Fifth, and a big chain of department stores up in Canada called Hudson's Bay Company. And then this current chapter where I just launched Trouble, a startup with a co-founder, Meredith Curran, and then I also sit on a number of public and private boards of directors. So this is my newest chapter. And the leadership ideas that I'd love to share with you today and the stories fit in a framework that I'm going to call ESP to try to help make it more memorable. So the E is for engagement, and I'm going to talk about an engaging culture. S is for supporting and lifting up one another, which I think is key to being an effective leader. And then the P is related to picking your spots and controlling what you can control. So I'll go back to each of those stories, but the ESP framework will hopefully help you remember it. So engaging culture is something that actually drew me back to the corporate world out of the academic world, which was an opportunity to lead an initiative at CVS to launch their Extra Care loyalty program. And when I first got there, the team was very much in a different position from where they had been the prior 5 years. The prior 5 years, the Extra Care program was a little test. They were off on an innovation team, a little bit on an island. They got to do what they wanted to do. No one was paying much attention because most people in the company at that time thought it was never going to advance to being a chain-wide launch. But then it became the big initiative for the year, and that put a spotlight on the team and created a lot of pressure and a lot of change and the need to actually work with all the other parts of the company that now were taking the Extra Care program seriously. So that was a big shift for the team. And when I got there, there was a lot of concern about how to do that well. And what we did was say, really at the end of the day, what matters most is all of us being engaged in the work that we're doing, have a real clear sense of purpose for why this is important to the company, and then involve each other and involve the rest of the company in what we were doing, so that it was a full engagement strategy. So the elements of that really do go back to the idea that at the end of the day, as an individual, you contribute, and you do that as part of a bigger team. And the way that you can think about doing that is always going to be with other people, for other people, and that's how work gets done. So within the engagement culture building, there's some 4 elements that underlie the idea of an interactive engagement leadership culture. One of those is work focus, and that relates to Hillary's point about a sense of pride and a sense of purpose, and always being really clear and reminding yourself and reminding your teammates and reminding your team what that sense of purpose is important, because it helps guide the day-to-day work. And then number 2 is mutuality, which is the idea that when you enter any conversation, always recognizing that you see others as equals that are in the room, regardless of whether or not they're higher or lower than you in the hierarchy. In that moment, you're in a meeting and you're an equal with the people in the room. And that frame of mind allows all of us to contribute in ways that can be most effective, and also to draw out the best from everyone around us. The third one is paradox and complexity. And that is really very much recognizing that there's uncertainty, ambiguity. Most things are not black and white. And if we can acknowledge those elements, meaning really call out what makes us excited at the same time as what's making us worried, as a team, we can solve through those problems if we label them and put them out there. And then the last one is returning authority to others. So really to think about what you like to do and what you do well, and raising your hand for that, and also delegating or asking others to do the things that you're not as good at doing can make for a winning team. And one of my mentors once gave me advice in that arena, where the advice was, take the ball, don't wait for somebody to pass it to you. So the idea that, you think you're going to put your head down and do a really good job and deliver the results like you described, Hillary, around the example of someone who was exceeding all of their targets. But at the end of the day, if you think that doing a good job is something that people are going to notice, and it goes back to Kristen's point too, that, some element of that will be noticed, but you also have to make sure that you raise your hand, you let people know where you've exceeded your targets and where you're doing really good work, because otherwise people aren't going to be as likely to notice it. And it's valuable to make sure that everybody understands where things are working and where you've been able to contribute to that. The S part of it, the support and lift up other people, is very much wedded in the idea of teamwork. And I think that's really what's exciting about most situations. You work as part of a team and you have an opportunity to lift each other up and to win. And the example here is related to some of the stats, which show that most CEOs actually have played team sports, over 90%, and that applies to women and to men. So the idea that you bring a team framework to your work every day is important, because it really is about winning as a group, not about you winning, but as the team winning. And if you address things in that way, you're going to lift up others at the same time you lift up yourself. So the example is from the Obama White House, where in 2014, the women recognized what research shows in many different arenas, which is that both men and women interrupt women more than they do men. And men often will be listened to in different ways. And so a woman can say something and then a man will say it, 3 minutes later, and appropriation of that idea goes to the man instead of to the woman that originally said it. So the group of women in the Obama White House, what they did was they said they were going to be very proactive. And when Lois would say something, I would then jump in right afterwards and say, great point, Lois. I really appreciate what you said. And I think that's something that would be very effective in order to make sure that Lois is getting credit for what she says. And obviously, if all the women are doing that for each other, they're lifting up all of them, lifting everyone up at the same time. And that can be so beneficial, not just for yourself, but obviously for all women. And then the last one is P, pick your spots and control what you can control, and recognize that the environment that you're in is much bigger than just the elements that you can control. And so that relates to an overall concept to me that I think is very central to the way that I think about my life, which is lucky. And I think I've been very privileged, very fortunate, very lucky in a lot of different ways, starting with birth, where I was born in a family, that I knew was going to be able to put food on the table. We had shelter. We didn't have to worry about getting a good education. College wasn't a question about whether or not I was going to be able to go. So I know I was very lucky. And the luck story was reinforced with some advice that was given to me by a mentor. His name is John. And I was in a situation where I was interviewing for a very important role, hire, and it was early on in my corporate career. So I was asking questions about how John selected people and what some of his most favorite interview questions were. And he shared that he said, by the time he talks to someone, they've already been through, vetting of their resume, vetting of a number of different interviews, and they've talked to a number of people at the time, but before they end up getting to him. And so what's most important to him is understanding cultural fit. And in order to do that, he would ask people if they felt they were lucky. And his concept there was that, again, working as part of a team, you want to be winning together. And in many cases, people don't appreciate what they have, and they look in a little bubble around them and decide whether or not they're making a little bit less or getting a little bit less than somebody else. And they're unsatisfied or dissatisfied by that narrow view versus the broader perspective of really appreciating all of the opportunities that they've had, all of the things that they've been able to control, and realizing the things they can't control aren't the ones to focus on. So that ESP framework is something that I think addresses a number of different arenas. And if we have time, we can get into some more specific examples. But again, I appreciate the chance to talk with all of you and to be part of this amazing panel of women.
Thank you so much, Barry. I've been filling up the chat, commenting on that. Something you said just hit me so close to home, and it's such a sad but true reality. I can't count how many times I've had male counterparts, team members, colleagues, mentors speak for me because I knew it wouldn't be heard, and it was so important to move the project forward that it needed to be heard more than I needed the credit. And that's a sad but true statistic that hopefully we're moving past, especially in the state where we have so many amazing women leaders and men as well that support us equally, right? I feel very grateful for that. So without further ado, let's take our last story from Dr. Lois Wims, and then we'll open it up to some Q&A. I don't think there's a lot of activity in the chat, so please, any of you listening, we'd love to hear your perspective, your thoughts, your comments, and your questions. So it's not too late. Feel free to share, or wait till Lois is done and then share, and we'll do some Q&A. I have plenty of talking points though, so.
Good afternoon, everybody. I realize probably didn't get this quite so clearly this morning, but I realize that I've had Barry's life in reverse. Started out a troublemaker, actually I'm sort of still a troublemaker, and ended up in academia. So a little bit opposite what Barry had to say. I would say that my parents would tell you that I came out of the womb saying, that's not fair. As the fourth of 5 children, K through 12 Catholic school kid, I rubbed up against discrimination against our gender, and always was someone who noticed things that were not fair and thought that I needed to bring that to someone's attention in the home, in school, in organizations. So have been a change agent, I would say, all my life. And sometimes with a lack of direct role models of my gender. So sometimes it was, I can't see it, but I can be it. And fortunately, that has changed. So for young women today, there are just so many wonderful role models in every field who might look like you or talk like you or think like you. So my journey has not been a particularly traditional one. And I would say my first bout of troublemaking began with the insistence that I should be able to be a police officer, that I should be able to succeed as a police officer. And what do you mean, women aren't allowed? And that's the way it was in the 70s. So my first job, not even yet out of college at 20 years old, was it wasn't my first job, but my first career move was the Central Falls Police Department, where I was the first and only female police officer. And every day was a challenge. I am someone who bores easily and needs a challenge. And although schooling has always been fun for me, and I've always exceeded my expectations in the academic realm, police work was a stretch and a challenge every single day of my life. And it stretched me and changed me in many ways. And as I talk about the lessons of leadership from that role and others, I'd like to talk about 3 inanimate objects. So we're going to talk about a sponge, a slingshot, and a salt shaker. So let's start with sponge, which is the way I have approached learning about what I'm doing at any particular time and learning, and just trying to absorb the lessons around me, to reflect on them, to have time for reflection wherever possible. And you can do a lot of really heavy thinking on the midnight to 8 shift in a police car in February. And to also be a sponge of the leaders around you, both taking the lessons from those who are successful, from those who have failed, and for those who you want to avoid some of the lessons that you've learned. And I think anytime I've been offered a leadership training opportunity, the interview has usually coalesced around, you've got to give me this opportunity because you see I'm a sponge, and I will take that learning and I will do something with it. When I left police work, and it may have something to do with the fact that I was a mother of one, wanted to have a second child, and that my husband and I were both on the same small agency competing for the same leadership roles. So we both wanted to be chief one day, and obviously it couldn't be both of us. And so, but I think what really coalesced it that a woman's audience would really appreciate is being at a barroom brawl as a nursing mother and realizing what getting kicked and being emotional might happen physiologically at the same time. So it was more important than ever that I got home at midnight to feed that little guy who had been screaming on his dad for the entire time. And so I left police work and went from my part-time gig had been teaching at the college level at Salve Regina, now university, and spent 20 years as a faculty member, got involved in leadership roles, grew my family, and was approached by someone in leadership, a woman in leadership, Sister Therese Antone, who said, you should be running this place someday. And have you thought about, having some leadership training? And I said, ironically, I just noticed that there's a position to run the police academy open. And I don't think they'll take a serious look at me, but I think I'm going to put in for it. And with her backing, I put in for it and was a finalist for the position. And I really wanted to change how police were trained. Did not get that position, but this leads to my second inanimate object, which is a slingshot. So often in life, one's children think and others think that by reading your resume, all you see is a trajectory. And what they don't see is the struggles, the jobs you didn't get, the mistakes you made, the bad fits. And in this particular case, did not get that opportunity. But the president of Salve put something in my lap like 5 minutes later to consider, which was the American Council on Education Fellowship in Higher Ed Leadership. And so I want to talk about the slingshot a little bit because it has really been operative in my life. I may be one of the few people who can say that twice in a higher education setting, I have been a finalist for a job I desperately wanted in an institution that seemed perfect for me and have been the first runner-up. And the job went to the other person. But I would, dust myself off, put myself in for something else, and always remember the people I met and the opportunity that I missed. And so twice in my life, it was about timing. And I was able to slingshot back into that role, maybe 2 years later, in one case 3 years later. And so slingshot, anytime you think it's a setback, remember that you've been pulled back with tension, and that tension is going to propel you forward. If you cannot let it break you, if you can react positively to those challenges, you're allowed to kick furniture. As I say to my kids, you're allowed to kick furniture for a day when you've not been treated fairly, when that's not fair, when you've been passed over for someone else. Always helps me when I see who did get the job. And if they're a completely and totally different person from me, you say, well, obviously I was not a fit at that time. The third piece that I want to talk about, which is something that I bring every time I build a team, or I'm allowed to build a team, or allowed to add to a team, is something called the salt shaker. So I ask everybody on this webinar to imagine yourself sitting in the bottom of a salt shaker and looking up. And what do you see? You see a lot of holes, and then you don't see what's between all the holes. There are many lenses that we bring to our work life. In mine, as you can see, there's a lens about justice. There's a very strong radar about fairness. There's a real sense of feminism. There's a sense of first generation college student. There's a perspective of impatience. Those things that we see the world. Structures. I'm not a big believer in structures, but I have to be able to function in a structure. But I also, when I'm putting a team together, I recognize that I see the world through my own salt shaker, and you see the world through yours. And you probably have some lenses that I need to consider and that we need to consider as a team. And to have a fully functional team, you absolutely have to have people who don't see the world like you do, people who perhaps are not feminists, who are really good on structure. Big confession here, I'm miserable about detail, right? I absolutely need the detail-oriented person. I was raised by a dad who said, think about this because you're all in business and I'm in nonprofit. I was raised by a father who always said, it's not a real problem if it's solvable by money. That gives me a particular perspective that annoys my admin and finance vice presidents or the financial people at the university, because I look to problem solve and worry about the financing of it later. But I need people on the team to say, look, can we do this in a cheaper way? Can we do this in a different way? Is there another way we can do this? But if you surround yourself on a team with people who look like you, think like you, talk like you, had your experiences, and tell you all the time how marvelous you are, you're missing so much of that worldview. You'll never get out of your salt shaker, and your team will be the lesser for it. I have worked for people who could not hear truth said to them. I try always to be somebody can tell me the truth, even if it's uncomfortable, because they see it from a different lens. So I leave you, be a sponge, understand when you're backtracking, or it feels like you're backtracking, that you're a slingshot and you're being propelled forward, and understand that you are limited by the bottom of your salt shaker if you do not allow other people's views in. Thanks a lot. Look forward to your question.
Thank you. Again, that was awesome. And I love your gold chair. I meant to comment earlier.
Yeah, this is one of those masculine leather, boardroom chairs.
But
no, I don't sit. I have a standing desk. So this is unusual. I'm playing a role here.
You look good in it and it matches everything. I love what you say about that because I always, right, Hillary, use hashtag together we are stronger together. I usually put together we are stronger. I believe that wholeheartedly. I loved what you just said because I'm a solutionist like you as well. And that's why I need Ashley on our team because she keeps me in line and lets me know my parameters so I can go solve problems and make the world a better place in the way I do. I really love that. And I think that speaks not only to the teams we're on, which some of the people watching right now might not be as lucky as I feel right now to be in an amazing organization with like a super complementary senior leadership team. We've just established a great extended management team underneath us that we're mentoring to bring them up. It's like the whole organization is just an A team right now. And I'm grateful every day for that. Not everyone has that luxury, right? And I'm 52 and I've worked through lots of other situations where it hasn't been like that necessarily. But something you said earlier, Kristen, about being very thoughtful of how you spend your time. We've all heard that, and I should quote it appropriately. And you probably know, Lois, of all of us, because you're in academia, who said you are the sum of the 5 people you surround yourself with the most. That's a good one, right? But being strategic, and I certainly try to impart that wisdom that I learned later in life with my 3 children. And we are the sum of what we surround ourselves with, right? And that's why I love hanging out with Hillary because she makes me stronger, better, smarter. And together we are stronger. And we talked earlier, I know we only have 10 minutes and it did cut us off the last time, so I'll try to keep us right on this time. But we talked a lot about mentors, peer advisors. I'll call you out, I guess, who in your career has been integral in your leadership journey? And we all give back. We talked about that earlier as well, which I love about this group right here are all learners, continuing lifelong learners, right? And always trying to better yourselves. And we're all do-gooders. We all want to make the world a better place and we give back, right? I know I mentor with VMS among many, many other things. So Kristen, I'm going to call you out first. Do you want to point out the importance of being a mentor, having a mentor or an advisor? And just say something to that. I'll call each one of you out maybe on that if you want to think about that.
Absolutely. I think I've been lucky through my whole life from elementary school up to have a lot of different mentors. And I do feel very privileged to have had that. And again, I spoke a little bit earlier to the corporate culture that I work in. I did have people constantly pulling me along and pushing me to try new things. So I think for the listeners, if you're in a position where you do have that, the biggest hurdle is saying yes sometimes. Whenever opportunities come your way, it can be scary or unnerving. You might not feel totally ready, but jumping when people push you to try things, I think is an important part of it. Even if you don't feel 100% prepared, someone is seeing it in you. And then just show up and work your tail off. Because part of it's like, I feel like, yes, we need to mentor women. Beyond that, we need to sponsor women. But really, I sponsor anybody that shows me strong potential. I think it's just as important to build those strong networks of men and pull them up if they're really hard workers and they have the potential. I just feel like sometimes it happens more naturally for men, so women need to be pulled harder sometimes. But I've had a lot of that in my career, and I feel exceptionally fortunate for it. And I'm grateful that I've had people to push me along. And now I feel like because of the role I'm in, I get the pleasure of doing that for other people.
And that goes back to Barry. Were you the one that said, take the ball? Don't wait for someone to hand it to you or toss it to you. I love that. So with that, I'll go back over to you, Barry, and see if you want to add anything to this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the mentors part and is tied in so much with what you said, Hillary, around someone who has your back and kind of the playing both of those roles, meaning making sure you have those people in your corner and also being that person for other people, that when you have an opportunity to do that, and obviously there are people that you feel deserve it. So I think the mentorship part of it, for me, at the end of the day, you know, a lot of what I like to say is that I think working with people and surrounding yourself with people that you really get inspired by and you enjoy being with is the most important part of work. I often say to people, you know, if you could have a role where you're saving the planet, but you're working with a bunch of jerks, versus a business that's not quite as noble, but you're working with people that have shared values, that have your back, you've got their backs, which would you choose? I mean, it doesn't have to be set up that way, but at the end of the day, I think who you work with and who you can help and who can help you, that environment of trust and mentorship and support is the most fulfilling part of work and what matters so much. One other thing I just want to say, which is more just building on the conversation about women dropping out of the workforce and the McKinsey and Lean study that says 25% of women are thinking about dropping out and or taking a step back in what they do. That same study talks about 70% of women don't feel that their partner is doing their share at home, that more of it is falling on them. Yet the partners think that they're doing more than their fair share. So ask your partners for support. And you know, this is broadening from mentor. I know I'm taking us a little off track, but I do think this is a really critical moment in the way that you opened, Hillary, about what's going on right now and what it means for women is so critical. And I think it really is important for all of us to mentor, support each other through this, but it's also important to take that home and make sure that that applies to your personal life as well as your work life.
I love that. I just shared something I shared with on a Slack with our management team the other day about trust and the importance of trust. And there's some actual, that I went offline, but I went back to what you were talking about with trust. And we only have a few minutes left. So can you add some of your nuggets of wisdom, Lois? Do you have anything to add to this conversation? Ooh, you've got tons, I know.
You know, I was thinking about the mentors in my life, and they've been legion, and both genders, but also the piece about partners. It is important to surround yourself in your private life with folks who can be there for you. We're constantly talking in higher ed about the trailing spouse, which is in and of itself a phrase that ought to get kicked to the curb forever. And I had a friend who said, why don't we co-author a paper called Railing About Trailing? Because the two-career couple is no longer an outlier. It's almost everybody. And sacrifices have to be made, and timing has to be delicate. And if anybody needs to watch that in action, I'm currently fascinated by a television show. It's Danish with subtitles called Borgen, but we are currently watching the Prime Minister of Denmark and her quite accomplished husband navigate this. And my husband and I, now that we're in our 60s, are looking at one another ruefully about the Railing About Trailing years and the commuter marriage years, and fortunate to be in the same state at the same time, but recognizing just what a balancing act that has been for both of us. And all partnerships really need an understanding of what a true partner is, which means someone who always has your back. I learned a lot about partnership and brotherhood on the police department, and it really does apply to marriage and conscious coupling.
I'm glad you brought that up. And that's something that as a divorced single mother of 3, 2 boys, 18 and 25, and then a daughter, 13, and something that was never taught to us, and I'm really trying to impart that to them. So thank you all. We're going to get kicked off in a couple minutes, so I don't want to cut any of you off in the middle of a sentence, but I think this was such a wonderful conversation, both this morning and this afternoon, and I feel honored to have made 3 new troublemaker friends. And Hillary, I already know, so we make trouble together. So I'm excited to make some trouble with the 3 of you in the future. And Adriana is always a troublemaker friend. So thank you. Let's go make trouble, and let's try to get rid of that data point that you brought up in the beginning, Hillary, and turn it the other way, move the needle in the other direction. So thank you all for being here. And if any of you want to connect with us, you have all of our information, and we're on LinkedIn and easy to find, and happy to help. So have a wonderful afternoon, ladies.
Thanks for moderating, Tuni.
Very much.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much, Tuni.
Goodbye.